And these stories are chilling because it totally shakes up the game. And actually, it doesn't only shake up the game for ghost hunters or paranormal investigators, it changes the game for you tonight in your home. Because if it is possible for ghosts, spirits, or demons to do to you what happened to me in these following stories, well, you can imagine what the results would be. So let's go ahead and get started with this episode of Dead Rabbit Radio Classics. Episode 124, No One Can Hear You Scream. A dispute at a workplace becomes a close encounter of the sword kind. And then I'm going to share some personal stories I have that involve ghosts and the ability to both mimic a human voice and to make your screams silent today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. You know what Tesla should have invented? I wonder if these exist, but a quiet heater. Most heaters are quite noisy. I'm saying this because I'm freezing right now. It is super cold here. I think it's probably about 35, 34 degrees this night. I can't run my heater because I'm recording. And also, I did have another story planned for tonight. That was a story that's been on the conspiracy iceberg for a while. I'm not going to reveal what it is just yet. But what happened was, I had just... I'll reveal it. So Monday's episode, we're going to do the Paleolithic Deep State. Do cavemen secretly run the world? And the story was prepped, it was ready to go, because the reason why I'm saying this, I try to do 2 conspiracy iceberg stories a week. That's kind of been my setup, minimum 1. But, so that one I had ready to go, and I knew what I was going to talk about, and I came across some brand new information on it that gave me a whole new angle to go on the story, so we're going to wait a little bit for that. And so because of that, I'm going to talk about one of my personal experiences. We'll get to that in a second. I tend not to like to talk about my personal experiences, not because I'm shy or anything, but because there's nothing I can really link to that. I'll see if I can try to find some articles that relate to this experience, but I always try to give you stories that I can provide backup for. But we've done stuff. The Stanley Hotel episode was mostly based on my experiences, and then the Shadow People invasion. But even those had some links, so we'll see. The ghost stories I'm going to tell you are quite odd. Okay, I wanted to tell this story real quick. It's from New News, and we're traveling again back to the year 2004. And this is a short one. It's such a bizarre story. We're in 2004. We're in the United States. And we're in a company called Peerless Steel Corporation. They make bolts and stuff. Actually, they don't. I just re-looked at my notes. They make metal powder for brakes. So they don't make bolts. But anyway, they make just giant Frankenstein bolts. And there was this guy who's at work. He got picked on all the time. By one guy in particular was always picking on him. And I thought it was a little ironic that the company was named Peerless and this guy had no peers. But anyway, so he's sitting at work and he's like... He might have been humming a copyright song, but I don't know. I'm going to use a non-copyrighted song. And he's humming, and he's sharpening it. He's hit or miss. I bet you never miss, huh? The song came out like 14 years later. But anyways, he's working on something, and people are kind of like, hey, dude, what are you working on? And he's like, I'm building a sword. And people are like, what? And it's a metalwork company. People are probably always building weird stuff. We used to build baseball bats in wood shop in high school. They don't allow you to do that anymore, I don't think. But anyway, but you never miss, huh? You got a boy. He's sharpening, making the sword. After a couple days, and no one really thought anything of it. After a couple days, he must have just been like, oh, holds the sword up, and then goes, everyone leave, except for you, bully. And everyone's like, and the thing is that at any point they could have said, dude, stop making a sword at work. Do it on your own time, and then leave it at home. But anyways, he's like, everyone just go home. I have business with this guy. And the other dudes don't go home. They do leave because the guy has a sword. They go outside, they call the police. And then the guy with the sword just walks up and just hits the bully on the back of the head so hard, nearly decapitates him. Basically just like a barbarian killing blow. And then he leaves. He runs away. So, runs away. And before the cops get there, he comes back to the factory, sits down, and as the cops are pulling up, he's drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette. And it's weird, because at any point they could have said, stop building a sword. But they didn't. They probably just thought he was kind of a harmless guy. You know, the article is quite vague, because I had to find a newer version of the article that I could link to. It's such an old event. But they don't really say what he was being bullied. He was being bullied because they're like, I bet you can't make a sword, loser. And he's like, oh, I'll show you. But yeah, nuts, dude. I can't imagine any workplace now somebody making a weapon and it going unnoticed. Unless it was like the cool guy that no one messed with. Like, he's so cool, he can make all the swords he wants. But for the most part, I think in workplaces today, if you walked around making gun noises with your fingers, you'd probably get dragged into HR, let alone making a 3-foot-long sword. It probably wasn't 3 feet long, but anyways, it was a long sword. And took place 2 days before Halloween. Actually, you know, maybe they thought he was making it for a Halloween costume. Still, they want to let you do that today. Okay, that's that story. So let's go ahead and talk about some creepy things that happened to me involving ghosts. And it's something that was very disconcerting. There was 2 particular events because it changed the way I looked at paranormal threats. And it's always kind of colored my attitude towards the paranormal and personal safety. So the first story, a little bit of background. Now, I know I have a lot of listeners around the world. We only have like 60% of our listenership is in the United States. The rest of it is global. But in America, in most major cities, people have seen these, and so I have to explain this real quick. What happens is you'll see places of business, you'll see real estate companies or burger shops or whatever, and there will be a dancing guy on a street corner with a sign. They dance around and they spin the sign around and they kind of do crazy tricks, and the sign says, you know, like, eat at Mr. Pickle's restaurant shop. Or buy your home at Honey and Vinegar Real Estate, whatever it is. So you see them around, they actually get paid pretty well. It's like $15 an hour to just sit there on a street corner, kind of dance around a bit and spin this sign. And you know, you listen to your own music. They don't give you music to dance to. You kind of pick it out. You're crunking with the sign. No one can read it. I remember I've done a lot of odd jobs in my life, and I don't necessarily mean that as a turn of phrase. I've worked at a crematory for a while. I've been a nanny. I've done all sorts of crazy jobs. Those 2 jobs weren't back to back, but I've had all sorts of crazy small jobs in my life. I worked for a psychic phone network for a while. That was a depressing job. I'll tell that story someday. But I remember once I was like, oh, you know, I could dance around for $15 an hour, and there was an ad in the newspaper for dancing guy on street corner, and I was like, I can do that. It's $15 an hour, you know. And this was back like in '98, so $15 was a lot of money back then. But anyway, so I remember calling them up, and they said, well, here's the thing. What we need you to do first, you need to prove your mettle. And I'm like, dance competition? And they're like, well, no, not a dance competition. They go, what we're going to have you do is you're going to put up, it was for a real estate company. They'll go all along this main route. It was Hazel Avenue in Orangevale, Citrus Heights, Sacramento area. But it was in Orangevale, down Hazel. You're going to put these signs up for this new real estate development, and each Friday night I had to put them up, and by Sunday afternoon I had to take them down, otherwise they got fined because they weren't allowed to advertise during the week. It was actually the only job I ever got fired from because I couldn't, I never took the signs down. I'd always leave like 1 or 2 signs up, I'd miss them, and they'd end up getting fined. But I remember the guy came to give me my supplies, he gave me a sledgehammer and a bunch of wooden stakes, and I was like, okay, this is cool because whether or not the job is any fun, I can at least fight vampires. And I remember him telling me, he goes, listen, kid, because I was probably like 19, he goes, listen, kid. He might not have said kid, but anyways, he's like chomping a cigar. He's like, listen, kid, you've got this job. You're going to put these signs up on Friday nights. You're going to take them down on Sunday afternoons. And if you do a good job, quote, he actually said this, if you do a good job, someday you'll be that guy dancing on the street corner. And I'm thinking, I'm beneath him? I'm beneath the Mr. Pickles guy? Like, I was a rung below him, and I ended up getting fired from that job. But so there was also this field it was off of Hazel Avenue. There's this large field, and we had gone there, me and my friends had gone there a couple times ghost hunting, because it was creepy. We had seen some shadow men there. I had seen a shadow man there, and I have a unique experience. Well, here, I'll tell this shadow man story here. So me and my friends rolled up to this field, because it sets the tone for this area. It looked like when you stood on the edge of the field, It was right off of Hazel, if you know the area, but near Gold River. But anyways, when you stood on the edge of the field, it looked like the field went on for it looked like it went on forever. It didn't, obviously, but in the middle of the suburban area, there was just this large field that had never been developed. I remember once I rolled up there with my friends, and I said, we all get out of our car, we're walking around, and there was this one guy who's like, I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in ghosts. And back then, I was like, totally believed in ghosts. Every ghost story was true, all that stuff. We rolled up to this field, and I was like, yeah, this place is pretty creepy. And the dude who didn't believe in anything, he was standing there with his girlfriend. We had probably like 6-7 people with us. I think we took a couple cars. And dude was standing there on the edge of the field, and I saw a shadow person. Okay, and let me say this too. Of course, all these stories you take with a grain of salt. Like, they did happen. They're 100% true. But if you don't believe them, that's fine. Because again, it's just one person telling a story to you. And I have nothing to back it up. But anyway, so I was standing there, and this dude who didn't believe in ghosts or nothing like that, he was just walking around, standing there with his girlfriend, and we're just kind of milling about, and I see a shadow person standing right behind him. Now, I'm walking towards the shadow person, and the dude's name was Chris. I'm walking up basically behind Chris. He's looking in one direction, and I see the shadow person standing behind him. And it was one of those weird things where I remember the shadow person almost having color in it. It's such a bizarre thing. But I couldn't describe it. It basically was a shadow-shaped human, but there was a little bit of color. It was so bizarre. And I walked up to, and I didn't tell Chris what was going on. I didn't tell him what I saw anything, or it's like, don't move, there's a spooky ghost. None of that stuff. I just walked up behind him, and I'm now maybe 1.5 to 2 feet behind Chris, and again, he's not aware of what I'm doing, and I put my hands where the shadow person was, and didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just kind of walked up to behind Chris, and again, I put, maybe even further, maybe 2 or 3 feet, I put my hands up to where the shadow person was, and when I did, Chris's knees buckled. Like, I saw him physically kind of like buckle down. And again, I didn't tell him anything that I was doing. And he turned around and he's like, what happened? And I was like, there was something behind you. And I walked up to it and I touched it, and he goes, I don't like this, man, I don't like this. And we hung out there for, we were there for maybe just a few more minutes, and he's like, I don't like this at all. And the plan was then to go to, I think it wasn't Sherry's, Caro's at the time. So we drive back down Hazel, go to Caro's. We all pull into the parking lot because we had multiple vehicles. And we get out, and Chris and his girlfriend at the time, and they're like, we're out. And I'm like, what's the matter? He's like, I don't feel good, dude. I don't feel good. And he just left. And it was a weird experience, and that wasn't the only experience we had at that field. A lot of times you would just get an eerie sense, or you would hear something moving around in the trees, which that could just be wildlife. But that shadow person standing behind him was always kind of a weird. I knew then that particular area was haunted. And so these two stories collide. So at one point, I had my sledgehammer. I was out in that area because it was right off the road where I'd put the signs up, and one day I was rolling with my boys, and I had my little brother there as well. So I had 2 of my friends who weren't there for the shadow people stuff. It was 2 other friends that I went ghost hunting with, because I did it a lot in my 20s. I was there with them and my little brother. We pull up to that field, and while we're there and we're like looking for ghosts, a car full of high schoolers showed up. Now, I don't want to oversell it, but Orangevale and Citrus Heights may have calmed down a bit, but Orangevale has always been basically, even though it's part of a large city, it's a suburb of a suburb, you get in fights, really. I got in a lot of fights. Back then. And you would just get in fights with people. And you would just have to, basically whenever you went out, you're like, there's a chance that I'm going to get in a fight tonight. It was just something that you had to deal with. So these high schoolers rolled up, looking for a fight. I'm standing there with my friends. We're all like, hey, let's go find ghosts. Maybe I could get an EVP. But we would still like beat the shit out of people. Like, you just, again, it didn't matter what clique you ran with, you had to be prepared to fight. And so anyways, this car full of high school students roll up, and they're like, hey, what are you guys doing? You know, just like talking trash, right? I'm not trying to be like a tough guy or nothing. I had my boys with me. It wasn't like, I don't feel like I'm trying to make myself to be out some sort of badass, but these dudes roll up and they're talking trash, and I'm just kind of letting them talk trash, you know, they're because I'm holding a sledgehammer. I'm holding and the sledgehammer that I got was like it was like a miniature sledgehammer. So it was probably about 3 feet long, because it was just for driving wooden stakes, and it wasn't a full, giant, long sledgehammer. But they roll up, and I have it kind of down at my waist, and the car doesn't see it, because it's nighttime. And they're talking trash, and I'm like,